Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So the chapter 6, as we know, is titled Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. So in this chapter, Krishna talks to Arjun about one of the other processes of making spiritual advancement, which is through the process of Dhyana or Ashtanga Yoga. So as we discussed, the Ashtanga Yoga is divided into 8 stages. And does anybody remember the 8 stages? The first stage was Yam, Niyam. The first 2 are Yam and Niyam. And these 2 stages are in terms of the do's and the don'ts for a person who is aspiring to follow the process of Ashtanga Yoga. So some of the do's are to live in moderation, to live a controlled life. Some of the don'ts are to live a life of celibacy, to live a life of enlightenment, to have control on the senses. So these are more external. So these are preparing. They don't have anything directly to do with Ashtanga Yoga, but they are essential prerequisites. So for instance, if a person is too much involved in different kinds of sense gratification, then the possibility of the person performing yoga is very, very rare, very difficult to do. So the first 2 stages, Yam and Niyam, they create an environment that is conducive to the subsequent stages. The next 2 stages are Hatha Yoga and Pranayama. So Hatha Yoga is also known as Asana, and that is perhaps the most commonly associated with yoga, especially in the Western world. When anybody says yoga, they typically associate it with Hatha Yoga or Asana. So these are various sitting postures that are designed to increase one's health and longevity, and to also increase the resilience of the body. And the reason is because the subsequent stages, they require one to spend a lot of time in meditation. So you can imagine, if somebody has back problems, or somebody has cervical problems, then it's very unlikely for the person to be able to sit for an extended period of time and perform meditation. So it is again a supporting anga. So the process of asana literally means sitting still. So through the process of asana, the practitioner becomes experienced in sitting still for an extended period of time. So one of the side effects of this, of course, is improved health, and that is what a lot of people now they focus on. Prabhupada says that it is in a way misusing the process of Ashtanga Yoga. You are practicing it more for its side effects rather than the main purpose, which is to make spiritual advancements. So after asana, the next stage is pranayama, and pranayama is more internal. So pran means the life airs, and pranayama is controlling your life airs. So pranayama is breathing exercises. They start off as breathing exercises, but ultimately they give you control on your pran. So the process of pranayama is to extend one's lifespan, because the process of yoga is very, very long. So it requires the practitioner to have a very, very long lifespan also. So the various kinds of breathing exercises, so as we discussed, that the soul is floating on 5 kinds of life airs. that is sustaining it in the body. And as we strengthen those life airs, then the ability to keep the soul in the body, which is extending the life airs, and also the ability for the soul to leave the body at will. So in the advanced state, the yogis, they can give up their body at any time that they want. So the process of pranayam is to control these life airs. So these 4 stages are considered to be foundation stages. They do not have any direct bearing on the process of making spiritual advancements, but they prepare the practitioner in terms of getting ready for the subsequent stages. So the 5th stage is known as pratyahara. And pratyahara is when one now begins to control one's mind. So ahar is food, and pratyahara is that one begins to take nourishment not from the external engagement of the senses, but from internal engagement. So one does not require what is considered to be recreational activities. One does not require social engagement. One does not require any kind of cultural engagement. So one begins to develop more satisfaction from within. After pratyahara, the next stage is dharana. And dharana is when one, so dharana means to make a resolution, to adopt, so dharan means to take on something. So dharana, at that point, the practitioner begins to focus the mind on the object. And depending upon the mood or the mentality of the practitioner, the person may focus on the impersonal Brahman, the person may focus on Paramatma, or they may focus on Krishna themselves. And dharana leads to the final 2 stages, which is Dhyana and Samadhi. So these are stages of more and more intense and concentrated meditation. So Krishna talks about these 8 stages of yoga over here in order to introduce the topic to Arjuna. So Astanga yoga is not possible in this current age because it is very difficult to do. It is really a process that was recommended for early ages, and specifically the age of Satyug, where people had very long lives and they had a lot of intellectual stamina also. It's a Kritiya Dhyayate Vishnu. In the age of Satyug or Krita, the recommended process is Dhyana. Kritiya Dhyayate Vishnu, Treta Yagyate Maka. That in the age of Treta Yuga, Yagya was the process. Then Dwapare Paricharyaya. In Dwapar Yuga, the process that is recommended is temple worship. Kalita Dharu Kirtana. That in the age of Kali, the process that is recommended is Kirtan, which is the chanting of the holy name. So we chant the holy name in 2 ways. We chant them in what is known as Sankirtan, which is we chant them congregationally, or we chant them as japa, as in a more solitary, introspective way. But the age of Kali has this benediction that whatever could be attained through the process of Astanga yoga in Satyug, whatever could be attained through the process of Yagya in Dwapar Yuga, and what could be attained through the process of temple worship in Treta Yuga, whatever could be attained through the process of temple worship in Dwapar Yuga, the same thing can be attained through the process of Sankirtan in Kali Yuga. So this process is established in all the scriptures as the Yuga Dharma. In Srimad Bhagavatam, towards the end, Sukadeva Goswami makes this point to Parikshit Maharaj, because this is happening at the junction of Dwapar Yuga and Kali Yuga. Dwapar Yuga is coming to an end, and Kali Yuga is is just around the corner. And Parikshit Maharaj asks, just like we have curiosity about the future, Parikshit Maharaj had the same curiosity, that what is this coming age going to be like? What will be the people like? How will they interact with one another? And in the 12th canto, Sukadeva Goswami, he gives a not very flattering picture of the Kali Yuga. He calls this the age of iron, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. He says people over here will be considered to be great only if they have wealth. People will be quick to anger and quick to engage in violence. So he talks various verses which he talks about various symptoms of the age of Kali. And then after that he says, Kalera dosha nidhe rajan asti ek mahaguna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sang param vrajet. He says, Kalera dosh nidhe rajan. He says, O king, this age of Kali is full of dosh. It's full of different kinds of things that are not good. Asti ek mahaguna. There is one thing that is really, really good, mahaguna, that is great. Kirtana deva krishnasya. That simply by chanting the name of Krishna, mukta sang param vrajet, one will immediately be liberated from the material contamination and reach the spiritual abode. So even though the process of Astanga Yoga is not suitable for Kali, Krishna still speaks it for the sake of completion. Because when we read our scriptures, we'll see that great personalities like Vishwamitra and Vashisht and Durvasha Muni, Narayan Rishi, they engaged in long processes of yoga. And then one would say that these great personalities were doing Astanga Yoga. Why shouldn't we? What is this about? Why shouldn't we do it also? So in order to address those implicit questions, Krishna puts Astanga Yoga over here. So in the first 33 verses, Krishna talks about the practice of Astanga Yoga. He talks about the external practice, how should one sit, how should one breathe, what should one think about. He talks about the various symptoms of advancement that one develops detachment, one becomes more and more, develops more equanimity. And he talks about he gives a very, very brief, the process of Astanga Yoga is described in details by Patanjali in Yoga Sutras. So there is a lot of details that how does one practice. Krishna over here, he does not give a lot of focus on practicing, but he talks more about it from a general philosophical perspective. And that's how the 33rd verse ends, in which Krishna talks about the stage of Samadhi. So we will begin from the 34th verse, but before that I just want to see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, so we'll do the 34th verse. I'm sorry, the 33rd verse. So verse 33, Arjun said, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So, as a prerequisite to Astanga Yoga, Krishna had talked about the necessity of controlling the mind. And he said that the mind can be your friend and your enemy. A controlled mind is your friend and an uncontrolled mind is your enemy. And unless you are able to control your mind, you cannot even hope to perform, engage in the process of Astanga Yoga. So Arjuna has patiently listened to all the details that Krishna has said, but then being a very intelligent audience, he goes back to the basics. He said that if I am not able to satisfy the prerequisite, how can I even hope to engage in the more advanced process? So he says that it appears impractical and unendurable. Two things that he says. Impractical, because it is difficult to control the mind. Unendurable, because if you remember, Krishna, through the different verses, he kept saying gradually, gradually, which means that this process of yoga is very, very long. Vishwamitra was performing Astanga Yoga for 60,000 years. And after 60,000 years of yoga, when he was in the more mature state of yoga, he heard the nuppurs, the ankle bells of an apsara by the name of Menaka. And just the sound, he didn't even see her, just that sound, and he gave up his practice. And he went searching for that sound, and he saw a very pretty young woman over there, and he changed his ashram. From being a sannyasi, he became a grahastha. For a year, he lived with her. He had Shakuntala as a daughter. So it's a very long process that is very much fraught with different kinds of trials and tribulations. So he says that it is impractical and unendurable. This is a new mic, so still getting used to it. This is my Father's Day gift. Will you notice there are no wires in this?
Can you look closer to your mouth? Because
Yeah, is it better?
yeah, this is better.
Okay.
When you're speaking, it's
So he says that the mind is restless and unsteady. So Krishna had talked about 3 qualities of the mind that make it difficult. He says it is chanchalam, nishchalam and asthiram. So and these are 3 qualities with increasing level of difficulties. So chanchalam means flickering. So just like you put a torch, if the battery is weak, and then you see the light might go strong and weak, but the light is still there. So in the more advanced stage, when one is meditating, then the mind might sometimes focus more or sometimes less, but it is always still focus. Nishchalam is that the mind is wavering, that it is there on the object and then it goes away, and then it is there on the object and then it goes away again. And asthiram is that the mind is distracted, that it is there on the object, it goes away, but it doesn't come back. So you're thinking about, you're chanting, you're thinking about Krishna, and then you start thinking about your work, and then your mind just goes there. That, this is where, these are my challenges, this is what it is, and pretty soon you realize your whole round is done, and your mind never came back. So Arjuna is resonating the same points, that the nature of the mind is that it is chanchalam and asthiram. So he said this is impractical. Next verse. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So does anybody have experiences with these qualities of the mind? That it is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. How many of you went on a diet? How many of you stayed on the diet forever? You stayed on it forever?
still doing it.
Still doing it. Okay.
Control.
She has a steady mind.
So you go on a diet. They say that New Year's resolution, the most popular resolution is I'll diet. And what is the average number of days that people stay on that resolution? 3 days. That's the average number of days. So the mind is very strong, very, very strong. That many times we know this is not in our best interest, but we still do it because the mind takes us over there. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the analogy of, and this is an analogy that is used at many places, that think of your senses as horses and mind as the rein. The rein is that thingy that controls the horses, and the intelligence is the driver, and the chariot is the body and sitting on the chariot is the soul, the jiva. So the senses in themselves are very, very strong. The nature of the senses are very, very strong. And unless the reins are stronger than the senses, it will be difficult to control the senses. So as the senses go, the mind goes. And as the mind goes, the chariot goes. And as the chariot goes, the jiva goes. When I was in college, and I'm sure you have had the same experience, that a group of boys, they, for whatever reason, they would take up smoking, and then at some point they realize it's not the best thing to do, but they're already addicted to it by the time. And I know I had a friend of mine, and he would say that anytime you see me smoking, you immediately stop me from smoking, and you take my cigarette and throw it away. And when I would see him smoking and I would try to take his cigarette away, he would actually fight with me at the time. That no, this is special, this is this, you have no idea how much tension I am in, and my life is full of tension. And his tensions were that his scooter was not working, or something very trivial. But there was one part of him that wanted to give it up. But when the senses were engaged, it's difficult to disengage the senses. And these are very gross examples. And when we look at the more subtle cases, when our senses are looking for glorification, when senses are looking for adulation, when our senses are looking for fame, very, very difficult to disengage them. That if somebody does not treat you well, then what is your first instinct? That this person is not treating me well, let me not treat the person well also. This is our senses forcing us to react in kind. Even though one part of our mind says, it's that person's problem. If he is not treating us well, it's an issue that he or she has to deal with. Why do I have to descend to that person's level? But we do. Even though our intelligence is guiding us, our mind forces us to descend to that level. So Arjuna is making that point from a very practical perspective, because Arjuna is a Kshatriya, he's a warrior. He's more into action. That you have given me all these teachings, what do I do now? So he has heard Krishna speak about the process of yoga, and in his mind it is like, how do I now practice yoga? And the focus first goes to controlling of the mind. And that's where he says it is very, very difficult. And remember, this is for Arjuna. He is a great king and Kshatriya in the Dwapar Yuga, and he has accomplished a lot. If you look at Arjuna's life, he was the foremost warrior of his time. He learned so much from his Guru Dronacharya, and he had so much of sense control that even when he went to Svarglok, he was approached by Menaka, and he refused to engage with her. So he had an enormous amount of exceptional person. But even then he is saying that very difficult to do that. So what about us? With the exception of Mataji, what about us? Very difficult.
Yes.
So that is why Krishna has deliberately put this over here, and Arjuna is asking this question not only for himself but also on our behalf. Next verse. Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and detachment. So Krishna is agreeing with Arjuna and disagreeing with Arjuna. So he's saying I agree. He calls him Mahabahu. Mahabahu is mighty armed. So he's saying if anybody can do it, you can do it. You're Mahabahu. You're a person with exceptional abilities. He says if anybody can do it, you can do it. He also calls him Kaunteya. Kaunteya is son of Kunti. So the acharyas say that while Krishna is encouraging Arjun, so you notice the difference between the two names. One is Mahabahu, one is Kaunteya. So Mahabahu is, he is saying that with your own endeavor you can do it. He is saying Kaunteya because he is reminding Arjun of his relationship with Krishna. So Arjun is the son of Kunti. Kunti is the sister of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the father of Krishna. So Krishna and Arjun are cousins. So Krishna is saying that you are yourself endowed with exceptional abilities to do that, and you have me, Kaunteya, you have me to help you. And he talks about two ways that is needed to practice it. He says, Abhyasena to Kaunteya Vairagena Chagrahate. So Abhyas is practice and Vairagya is renunciation. So this is a very basic principle of aspiring transcendentalists. This is a very basic principle of spirituality, that it runs on two tracks. It runs on the track of Abhyas and Vairagya. So what is the Vairagya from? What is the renunciation from? Any ideas? What are we, when we are aspiring to take a path of spirituality, what is it that we try and renounce? Parishit Prabhu?
Desire for material life.
Very good. So Vairagya is that we try to develop detachment from the material world, and Abhyas is that we start practicing the spiritual conception. So one is freeing us from our current entanglement, and the second is taking us to where we like to go. So the whole process of spirituality, if you look at it, it is based on these two tracks. For instance, like when we take initiation, then we are asked to take 5 vows. So 4 vows are for detachment and 1 vow is for attachment. So we take the 4 vows of no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. So these are the 4 vows that help us develop material detachment. And the 5th vow that we take is that we'll chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day. So that is the one that gives us spiritual attachment. So any practice that we, Prabhupada would give the example of considering ourselves to be a beaker. A beaker is like a glass that is full of some black inky substance, and we want to fill it with milk. So there are 2 processes to do it. One is that you empty the glass and then you fill the milk in it. The second is that while the ink is there, you start putting milk in the glass. So initially you will have a lot of ink and a little bit of milk, and then you'll have more milk and a little bit of ink, and ultimately you will have only milk there. So the process of emptying the glass of ink is that of material detachment, and filling it with milk is spiritual attachment. So as we practice our bhakti, we try and do both of them simultaneously. We try and control our attachments to the material world, and we try and develop our attachment to the spiritual conception. So Krishna is introducing this very, very basic concept to Arjun, even though it's in the context of Ashtanga Yoga, but it applies universally to any spiritual advancement. That if you have to go from point A to point B, and if you're tied up at point A, you first have to untie yourself, and then only you can walk. In the 15th chapter, Krishna will describe it more elaborately. He gives the analogy of a banyan tree, and he says the jiva is entangled in the various. So the banyan tree, as you know, has a lot of roots. It has so many secondary roots that sometimes it's difficult to distinguish that which is the primary root and which is the secondary root. And he says the jiva is so entangled in the various trunks and leaves and branches and roots of the banyan tree that in order to make spiritual progress, he has to first find where the trunk of the tree is, cut it down, and then free himself from there. Questions, comments?
He said that you have to control your mind, but how to do it? That's the.
Can you
We
give it the
didn't
mic?
talk anything about
Can I give
how
it?
to do it. I know attachment from the material world, but he didn't. Is there any other example you can give us? This way you can learn to control your mind.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. So you're right. Krishna at this point, he's not speaking too much about the how-tos. He does not really say how to exactly, at least at this stage. He's not saying how to control the mind. In the later chapters, actually beginning from the next chapter onwards, Krishna will begin to speak more about the how-to part of it. That in order to make spiritual advancement, he starts giving practical, applicable hints over there. So we'll talk about it when we reach that chapter. Anything else? Any other questions?
I just heard this little small story from Bhayahari Prabhu's lecture, that there was this guru. He had a disciple, and the disciple asks him that the Guru Maharaj, where is the problem? What I want to get out of this place. I want to get out of this material attachments and this material suffering and everything, but I'm not able to do. What's stopping me? So then Guru Maharaj says that, okay, you come tomorrow. I'll give you the answer tomorrow. So then he goes the next day and he sees that his guru is holding a tree trunk really tight, and then he's telling the disciple that just release me from here, let me go. And so he tries to move his hands, and he tells him that just leave it. So he says, he holds it even tighter. So then the disciple fails. He says, I cannot release you. You have to fight it yourself. And then he says, this is your answer. But you don't want to really leave it. You are holding so tight the material attachment.
Good, thank you. Next verse. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So he's restating the prerequisite that he had stated earlier on in the chapter. That if the mind is unbridled, which means that we follow the mind. So remember the analogy of the bridle that was given, the reins. So reins are also known as bridle. So if the horses are simply pulling the bridle, then the chariot will go wherever the senses will take one. So you're going there and the senses say, this is what you really want to, this is what we really want. Whether it's in terms of eating, or whether it's in terms of sleeping, or mating, or defending, wherever the senses take you, then the chariot follows. And Krishna says, for such a person, self-realization is very difficult work. But one who strives by appropriate means. So, going back to Avinash's point, Krishna is not giving details. He's saying appropriate means, because he wants to keep some information appearing when the context becomes more relevant at the time. But he's making this point that the control of the mind is very, very important. So Krishna says, that is my opinion. So in Bhagavad Gita, very, very few times Krishna says these two things. That he says, Tat Shrunu, listen to me, or he says, Mat Para, my opinion, which means that they are verses of extreme importance. That Krishna wants Arjuna to. So when Krishna says that is my opinion, that becomes a universal fact. When we say this is my opinion, it's just an opinion. Could be, so when I say it's an opinion, it means that you have another opinion and we could agree or we could not agree. But when Krishna says, Matpara, when he says my opinion, it becomes a Vedic truth. It becomes an absolute truth. So he's emphasizing over here, unless you control your mind, you have no hopes of making spiritual advancements. So he's emphasizing that to Arjun, and he's planting the seed over here so that he can nourish it later on. So now let's see what Arjun responds by saying. So Arjun says, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? So what do you think Arjun is responding to Krishna's guidance of controlling your mind? What does this question reveal about Arjun's state of mind? So Krishna is saying, you do this and you will be successful. And Arjun says, what happens to one who is not successful? So the point that he's making is very difficult to do this. Because right away he asks the point, he's not asking what happens to one who is successful, which means that he will be subscribing to Krishna's injunction. That abhyasena vairagena, I can do it. I have it under my control. I can control my mind completely. So what is going to be my destination? Or what is going to be the destination of the person who has controlled the mind? But he asks a different question. That what is the destination of one who starts but later on is not able to endure? So we start things in the mode of passion and we endure them in the mode of goodness, and we destroy them in the mode of ignorance. So it is very easy to start things because the mode of passion is the predominant mode. It's very easy to start things. I'm in the IT field, and one of the things that we always give guidance to when people are developing systems is develop systems that can be easily maintained later on. Because people will develop systems, they have all this enthusiasm, they're building something new, they'll put in 24 hours a day, they'll build great systems, and then when the systems are running on an ongoing basis, then all of a sudden they start crashing, they start producing unexpected results, and then by that time the persons are either gone or they've lost interest in it. So millions of dollars are basically wasted because of that. That people put so much of focus on creation just because it's a natural resonance. We are naturally in the mode of passion, so we like to create things. Who was giving me this example? Shwami Prabhu was giving this example of how a friend of his, he's very handy at home, so he likes to start a lot of projects. He fix the basement, do this, do that, but he never completes them. And his wife is constantly complaining about him. That I'm a little better. I never start the projects also. So, but we have that experience that so many times we'll start things. We are enthusiastic. We'll start things, but the mode of goodness that is required to sustain them on an ongoing basis, it's very difficult. And Arjun, he puts his finger on that. He says a person starts it, but is unable to maintain it because of worldly mindedness. What's the destination of that person? So verse 38. O mighty arm Krishna, does not such a person who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? So again, a very practical question. So the questions of Arjun are questions that he is asking on our behalf. So many times when we start this process, when we go to the process of spirituality, then we have these doubts in our mind that what about my career? What about my job? What about my education? What about my family? And we think that the part of us want to take to the process of spirituality, and part of us is hesitant to leave our material engagements. A lot of us have experienced this, that when we become more serious about spirituality, then the people that we associate with, the things that we would like to do in our spare time, they change. Like last weekend, we went to New Vrindavan. So that is something that we would like to do because it enhances our spirituality. But another person might say, okay, I have a weekend, let me go to Atlantic City or Las Vegas and gamble over there and see the shows. And then, and I have this experience many times. Monday we meet back, at work, and one of the questions is, what did you do on the weekend? And then some person says, oh, I watched this show, or I watched this something else, and they'll say, what did you do? And I'll say, I went to the temple, and I had a Bhagavad Gita discussion in my house, and and they look at me. They don't say it, but they look at me. I can see it in their eyes that when you get a life, do something with your life.
You can tell them that you get a life.
And maybe they can see that in my eyes. I don't say it, but this is something that these are the doubts that plague us. That what will spirituality do to us? Will it weaken our desire to succeed? Will it impoverish us? Will it affect our health? Will it affect our relationships? So Arjuna is asking this question, that what happens to such a person that he has undertaken in the process of spirituality, then he is neither here nor there. If he succeeds, then it's okay. He goes back to Krishna. His life is perfect. What happens if he does not succeed? He is neither here nor there. He gives an analogy of a riven cloud. So if a cloud detaches itself from the larger cloud, then the wind can blow it anywhere it wants. It does not have an anchor anymore. So the cloud neither belongs to the material conception nor to the spiritual conception. And Arjuna's question is very valid, because this is something that Krishna himself spoke in the 4th chapter towards the end. He says, Agyascha Shadadanascha Sanshayatma Vinashati Nayam Lokasti Na Paro Na Sukham Sanshayatma. So he talks about three kinds of persons. Agyas, persons who are ignorant. So people who don't even know about the existence of God or spirituality. Agyascha Ashratadanas, people who are faithless. Then Sanshayatma. Sanshayatma is what Krishna is talking over here. That the reason one does not succeed in the endeavor is because one has doubts. One does not have any faith. He says Sanshayatma Vinashati. He says all these three kind of people get destroyed. And then he picks on the Sanshayatma. He says Nayam Lokasti Na Paro Na Sukham Sanshayatma. That a person who is doubting will not get any happiness in this world or in the next world. So that is why right at the beginning Krishna says, if you have to take to the process of spirituality, do it with full conviction. In 2nd chapter verse 41, he says, Vivasatmika buddhi ekahe kuru nandana bahushaka anantasya buddhaya avesatina. He says, what is the symptom of one who takes to spirituality? Vivasatmika buddhi ekahe kuru nandana. That with single-minded focus, the person takes to the process of spirituality. Does not mean that you become perfect in it. Does not mean that immediately you are back to the spiritual world. But it means that your conviction is there. Your faith is there that this is what will ultimately take you where you would like to go. So when you travel from DC to Delhi, you sit on the plane, you have conviction that this plane is going to take you to Delhi. You sit with that full conviction. Before you sit, you'll call up India and say, I'm on the plane. I should be there in however long, 17 hours, 18 hours. I'm going to be there. So you won't call on the phone and say, I'm on the plane. Maybe I'll make it. Maybe I'm not. Maybe the plane will take me somewhere else. Maybe the plane will fall in the ocean. You won't say those kinds of things, right? You'll say, okay, I'm coming. I'll see you in this time. So that is Vivasatmika. Ekahe Kuru Nandana. And then he says, Avyasatmika. A person whose mind is not focused, he says, nothing for him. Verse 39. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So you see the difference in the mood of Arjun's questioning Krishna. So you remember at the beginning of the 3rd chapter, what did Arjun say to Krishna? He said, my mind is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. So basically he's saying, Krishna, you really don't know what you're talking about. And you're just confusing me. Then in the 5th chapter, he's a little bit more mellow. And he says, Krishna, kindly clarify, you have still put me in doubt. At this point, he's saying that whatever you're saying is right. The problem is on my end. I'm not able to understand what you're saying. So you see that his mode of submission is increasing as he's hearing more and more from Krishna. As he's appreciating the infallible logic that Krishna is putting, his faith in Krishna's words are increasing. So he's saying that this is my doubt. He's not saying, Krishna, it's your problem. He's not saying that, Krishna, you're not able to explain it clearly to me. He's not saying, Krishna, you're confusing me. He's saying, whatever you're saying is fine, but I'm a person of limited intelligence. So I'm not able to grasp everything that you're saying, so I have my doubts. And nobody but you can dispel it. So it is said that when the exchange of knowledge happens on a platform of submission, that one should be convinced that the person who is giving knowledge is qualified to give knowledge. Srila Prabhupada mentions that in the introduction, that unless you have faith that this Bhagavad Gita has been spoken by Krishna himself, and Krishna is the personality of Godhead, you will never be able to get anything out of Bhagavad Gita. There are more than 3,000 different translations of Bhagavad Gita. There is Bhagavad Gita to better management. There is Bhagavad Gita to make more money. Right? There are so many translations. There's Bhagavad Gita as I understand it. Right? I was seeing a book of it in India. It's very nicely illustrated. Bhagavad Gita as I understand it. And I was like, why should I be interested in how you understand it? I would be more interested in how Krishna explained it. So this notion of submission, tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya ubdakshanti te jnanam jnaninam tattvadarshana. Okay, when Krishna describes the relationship between a guru and a shishya, he said tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. It's the duty of the disciple to inquire from the spiritual master. But what should be the mode of that inquiry? 2 things. It should be submissive and it should be accompanied with service. So one inquires and says, show me Krishna if you want to show me. If you want to prove there is Krishna, show me Krishna. Like there was this politician in the south, I forget his name. He would stand up on the podium and he says, if there is a God, then may God strike me down with lightning right now. And if I am not struck down by lightning, then there is no God. Of course, he wasn't struck down by lightning, but eventually he died. Right? And I was listening to a lecture on this, and it's like, God is not your servant. What does God? I go outside and say that if Trump is the president, then may he come right now and punch me on the nose. With Trump, it's quite possible he might do it. But but typically, why would anybody care? There are so many people out there, so many people who have such kind of negative opinions. He's the president of the US. He has so many more important things to do. So why does one person standing on the street corner saying, if the president of the US exists, may he come and punch me on the nose? It's quite possible somebody else might come and punch him on the nose, but why will the president care about it? So this person, he was saying he died eventually, but why does Krishna have to come all the way, from the spiritual world to punch him on the nose, just because? And he's not even a devotee. Krishna will come for his devotees. So the mood of questioning should be submissive, not challenging, accompanied by service. So the biggest service that a disciple can do to the spiritual master is to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And what is the duty of the spiritual master? That after having seen the tattva, after having seen the truth, it is his duty to reveal it. Srila Prabhupada said that I have received this knowledge from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, from my spiritual master, so now it is my duty to share it with all of you. Okay, any questions, comments? So we'll do the next verse, verse 40. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So this is Krishna's assurance. So if you undertake spirituality, the path of spirituality, there will never be any failure. Whether you succeed fully or not, you're still successful. That is where spirituality is different from material endeavors. In material endeavors, you have to succeed completely before it can qualify as success. But in spiritual endeavors, even failure is success, because you have started on that process. And you see that at this point, Krishna's mood has become so loving. He says Partha. So Partha is again Pratha. Another name of Kunti Devi is Pratha. So he's saying, you're so dear to me. And then he says, my friend. He says, one who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So he says, he uses the word Tat. So my friend is a rough translation, but Tat actually means that one who is a very intimate friend, one who is very close to. So Krishna is invoking that friendship. So that's the mood of Krishna, that once you undertake the process of spirituality, he becomes very, very affectionate towards the person. He does not look at so much success, so much failure. Krishna is Bhava Grahi Janardhan. He absorbs the mood of the person. That this is one jiva who has so many challenges. He has senses that are driving him at different places. He has a weak mind, and he has bad habits from previous lives. He has different contaminations, but he's trying somehow or the else, and that itself makes that jiva very, very special to Krishna. So in the 9th chapter, he says, Api chet sudurachara bhajate mam ananya vak sadhureva samantavya samyak vivasita hi sa. He says, Api chet sudurachara. Durachar means sinful person. He said, even if the person is most sinful, Api chet sudurachara bhajate mam ananya vak. But if the person is chanting my name, sadhureva samantavya, consider the person as saintly. Samyak vivasita hi sa, because he is properly situated in his constitutional position. So of the so many billions and billions of souls, there is a very small fraction of souls that will even make this endeavor to turn to Krishna. Most of the people are absorbed in the material life. Prabhupada in the purport, he says that of all the souls, most of the souls are in the form of life that is not even conducive to making spiritual advancement. They may be in the plant form of life or animal form of life, so it's not conducive to making spiritual advancement. Of the very few souls that have the human form of life, the majority of them are engaged in gross sense gratification. A very small of them who are thinking about spirituality, the majority of them turn to spirituality for material benefits. That Krishna or Durga, wherever they'll say, I'll give you 10 rupees, in return you give me a promotion, or you give me good health, or you get me married. So they're mostly in this Prabhupada would say order supplier business. Right? They'll say, I'll give you some, this is my order, Krishna please supply it. The majority of the people who turn to spirituality are in that mode. A very small fraction of them turn to spirituality in a causeless manner. And of them, a very, very small portion will reach perfection. So people who are endeavoring on this path of spirituality are very special to Krishna. He says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu na me dveshasti na para. So he says that for all the souls, Samoham sarva bhuteshu, I am the same, na me dveshasti na priya. I don't envy anybody, nor do I, priya means, nor is anybody favorite to me. Samoham sarva bheteshu na me dveshasti na priya, ye bhajante te mam bhaktya, maiteteshu chapyam. But one, ye bhajante te mam bhaktya, but one who is a devotee of mine and who chants my name, maiteteshu chapyam. He lives in me and I live in him. So such intimacy Krishna demonstrates. That for the majority of the people, he says Krishna is like that, I am neutral. I have nothing to do with them. Why? Because they have nothing to do with me. So they are all living their lives according to the modes of material nature. They are all enjoying and suffering according to the laws of karma. Krishna has nothing to do with them. You do good karma, you enjoy, but you ultimately die. You do bad karma, you suffer, and you still die. Krishna has nothing to do with it. But he says that those few who will take to my devotion, my tuteshu chapiyam. He gives them from samoham sarvbhuteshu, that I am neutral, he goes to the other extreme, that they live in me and I live in them. Great amount of intimacy.
But most of the people are deceiving themselves. They think they are with Krishna, but they are just thinking that way.
You're right. Right. So the process of spirituality begins with sincerity. That you have to be sincere to yourself first, and after you're sincere to yourself, then you start becoming sincere to Krishna. After that.
Malika had a question.
Yes, Malika.
So, Prabhuji, this is talking about Dhyana. This to me has a very strong flavor of bhakti.
Yes.
Because we are talking about being submissive, about making sure we believe that God is going to protect us.
Yes.
Is there a link going forward?
Yes, it's a very good point. So these are the transitionary verses. So this is the end of the 6th chapter. From the 7th chapter, Krishna begins to talk about bhakti. So he's transitioning Arjuna over to the mood of a devotee. So we notice that towards the end of the chapter, Krishna builds this bridge. That towards the end of the 3rd chapter, he transitions Arjuna into Gyan. And towards the end of the 4th chapter, he transitions Arjuna over to Nishkam Karma. So he builds this bridge of verses, so that as we are reading it, then we also develop that mood that he wants us to imbibe in the subsequent verses. It's a good point. Thank you. So this verse itself is actually a lot of for devotees who are practicing like us. It is actually a very strong safety net. It is because all of us have our challenges. We try and chant, and sometimes we're able to chant well, sometimes not. We try and follow the regulative principles. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. And then we may develop that mentality that either we are perfect or we don't do it at all. Sometimes I remember when we were taken to this process, this 20 years ago, and my family in India was very upset at me, saying that this is not the time for you to take to this process. When you get older, when you retire, then take to bhakti. And the fear in their mind, of course, was that I take to the process, and then I leave my job. I was newly married at the time. I leave my wife, and I go and sit under some tree and smoke some ganja or hashish. So they had that fear in their mind, because the sense is that either you succeed perfectly or you're a failure. That's the material conception that we have. You sit in an entrance exam, you either pass or you don't pass, right? You can't just say that, I almost passed, so I can attend a few classes and, I maybe get a half a degree or something like that. So our material conception is one of duality, of either happiness or distress, either honor or dishonor, either success or failure. But spirituality is not like that. Even in failure there is success, because spirituality, at least bhakti, and as you're rightly pointing out, bhakti is relationship. It's not about evaluation, right? For a parent, a child can never fail. There are just different levels of success. You did great. You did very well. You did well. You could have done better, right? It's very few parents will go to their children and say, "You're such a failure. Just get out of my house." Because the relationship is not like that. The relationship is nourished by love. That's the relationship that Krishna has towards us. That when we are embarking on the path of spirituality, then He is not going to evaluate us from the perspective of how many breaths did we take, how much of yoga did we do, or how many days we got up early morning, or how many good rounds we chanted. This is not to say that we don't do all that. We still do that, because that demonstrates our sincerity. But Krishna is going to evaluate us as a parent evaluates a child. That this is my child who is trying to come back to me. And that's why you see that Krishna's, from the 7th chapter, you see Krishna's tone changes completely. Become very loving, very, very syrupy. He addresses Arjun, and we see that over here. He's saying Tat and Kwanteya and Pratha. He's invoking his familial relationship. Earlier on he would call Arjun as Mahabhavu, or Arjun, basically more in terms of what his position as a Kshatriya king was. So so this verse is considered to be kind of like a parallel verse of 240. In chapter 2, verse 40, Krishna speaks a very similar thing, and I think for the sake of completeness, or maybe not, we don't have time for that. But 240 is a parallel verse, same point Krishna makes at both the verses. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a very important point, that sometimes when people take to the process of spirituality, this is especially people who have a lot of karma kand influence in the families, a lot of ritualistic influences, that people who do a lot of what's the word, like samskars, people do a lot of samskars, right? So many times they have a lot of fear that what will happen to me if I take to spirituality. Will I be punished? Like I have this conversation with my mother. My mother does a lot of ritualistic puja, and everything with her is very ritualistic. She'll get up, gets up early in the morning, takes a bath, does the puja. And even the puja is very rigid. And, water over here, flower over here. Then while she is doing puja, nobody can speak to her, and house has to be quiet. So it's regimented. and then she, she cannot very much relate to the fact that you can do puja spontaneously also, that you're doing it more in terms of establishing relationships. So Prabhupada speaks about this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm not sure if I know the meter, but I'll try. Tattva swadharmam charanabhujam hare bhajan apakvo thapate tato yadi yatra kwa vabhradam abuddhamushrikim kovatapto abhajatam swadharmatma. Translation: if someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. So Prabhupada quotes this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam to show the difference between a material endeavor and a spiritual endeavor. That in spiritual endeavor, even if it is incomplete, even if you ignore all the material aspects to it, there is still success. But from a material perspective, you may even do it perfectly, but even then there is no success. Why? Because all karma is bad karma. Even if you do the most pious activities, what will that give you? That will give you opportunities to enjoy. You may get birth in a heavenly planet, but even the demigods die. Even they have to suffer birth, death, disease and old age. Not to the same extent as we do, but even they suffer. So everybody from Brahma to the lowest planet is caught up in this cycle of a janma karma and jara vyadhi, birth, death, disease and old age, regardless of whatever karma you do. So it is either a bad deal or it is a worse deal. So that is why there is so much of focus that is given to extract oneself from this cycle of birth and death and to engage oneself in the process that leads one to liberation.
You have 10 more.
Okay, I'm okay. I think I have just 4 more verses. 7 verses. Okay. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So remember, Arjun, the original question was, what happens to an unsuccessful yogi? So Krishna is now addressing that. So this is a yoga bhrashta, a person who is unsuccessful in the early stages of yoga. So as we know, the Astanga Yoga was 2 stages, 8 stages, the 4 initial stages, which is known as Yoga Rurukshu, and the 4 advanced stages, which are known as Yoga Rudha. So when a person is unsuccessful in the early stages, the reason they are unsuccessful is because they still have a lot of material desires. And how does Krishna satisfy them? He gives such a soul birth in the family of somebody who is very rich or very aristocratic, so that they get an opportunity to enjoy the material desires that have caused them to fall down here. So while there is failure, but there is still success. Now material enjoyment is not really a success, because ultimately it will still lead to suffering, but the understanding is that when one is born in a family that is opulent, there are more opportunities for the person to make spiritual advancement. Because there are many people who are born in families where just the fight for survival is so consuming that it is difficult for the person to invest their time or the mind or the energies into spiritual advancement. It's not difficult. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. I mean, we see many people who do take to spirituality, but like they have this, I don't know if it is a bhajan, they say, bhuke pet bhajan na hoye gopala. If you're hungry, difficult to do bhajan, right? So when one gets a birth in a family that is opulent, then at least that impediment is not there. So this is Krishna's reciprocation to a person who has fallen off in the early stages of yoga practice. Next verse. Or if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly such a birth is rare in this world. So if a person was in a very advanced stage of yoga and then he dies, he is unsuccessful at the time, then Krishna gives him birth in the family of a devotee. Because when the person has reached the advanced stage, he has already begun to establish his desires to make a connection with Krishna. And what better way than to further that desire is to take birth in a family of devotees, where right from the birth they are participating in spiritual activities. So Srila Prabhupada used to be very strict for his disciples. He would say that take very good care of your children, because these are all great souls that Krishna has given to you so that you can help them complete their spiritual journey. Taking birth in the family of a devotee is a very, very special opportunity that is given to a very, very special soul. And here Krishna is giving that reason, that because the person has already advanced in their spiritual practice, all they need is good association. And Krishna provides that through giving them birth in a family of devotees. Next verse. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. So the environment is conducive and the impressions in the mind of this jiva are strong. So we see that ourselves, that there are some children that naturally take to spirituality. Prabhupada gives the example of Bhakti Siddhanta, his Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Siddhanta, that by the time he was 7 years old, he could recite the whole Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit. It took him a very short time to learn the whole Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada himself was the example that at a very, very young age, he was heading the Rath Yatras in the neighborhood. He was talking to people about spirituality. So even without having a lot of training, without a lot of external teaching, just those impressions that were there from the previous lives, they manifest on their own. And that is again, so later on Krishna says that I am remembrance and I am also forgetfulness. So for devotees is remembrance. That when devotees take birth again, then Krishna, he makes sure that they remember. The Srimad Bhagavatam, there is the pastime of Maharaj Bharat, that he was a great king, and at a very young age he renounced everything and he went to the jungle to perfect his spirituality. But there he got very much attached to a small deer, and because of his attachment to the deer, he gave up his spiritual practices, to the point that when he died, he was thinking about the deer. And because Krishna said Antakale tumameva, so whatever one thinks at the time of death, he says you get that form. Because he died thinking of the deer, he became a deer in his next birth. But because Krishna's mercy was on him, even as a deer, he remembered that in his previous birth, he was Maharaj Bharat. And when he died as a deer, he took birth again in a family of devotees, and then he remembered his 2 births before. He remembered that he was Maharaj Bharat, and 2 births before he was a deer, and then when he took birth again as Jat Bharat, then he completed his spiritual journey and achieved perfection. So even though the jiva may falter, even though the jiva may stray, Krishna is always there to help. His guiding hand is always there to take us back to the right path. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of scriptures. So Krishna is now talking about the manifest symptoms of such a person, that even without seeking them, even without going to school, even without getting association of other people, because of the past samskars, the person is automatically attracted to spiritual practices, and such a person is above the ritualistic practices of the scriptures. So the ritualistic practices of the scriptures are karma kand. That do this, do this, do this, and many times people are very attracted to it because it's a safety net. It's also from the Vedas, but it's also material. That there is a very strong correlation. The more that you give in charity, the more opulence that you will get yourself. The more austerities that you follow, the lesser material miseries you will have. So there's a very strong correlation between karma kand and this. So people are attracted to it. But a person in this mood who has advanced in the stage of yoga, he has already transcended the need for ritualistic practices, and he automatically engages into devotional service. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the spiritual goal. So the goal is there. So Prabhupada would say, when you start the process of spirituality, your success is automatically assured. The only thing that is in your hand is how long will it take for you to reach that goal. The goal is there. It is yours. So once you take to the process of spirituality, it is like starting on a path that will ultimately take you where you want. All that you have in your hand is how quickly. In this very birth, will I perfect my life? In next birth? In 1,000,000 lifetimes? That is where our sincerity comes. So Krishna here, again he talks about, so here he is illustrating to Arjuna the difficulty of Ashtanga Yoga. So he says, ultimately after many, many births. So he's making the point that a yogi has to go through many births in which they will successively improve their process, their adherence to the process, and ultimately reach success. Contrary to that, a bhakta in this very birth can go back to Godhead. That's the difference that Prabhupada brings forth. Last two verses. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. So far Krishna has talked about karma kand, which is an empiricist worker. He has talked about gyan, which is an empiricist, a person who goes to knowledge. Ascetic is a person who takes on austerities for material gains, like people who fast. Like in India, you have that. Especially young women, they'll say we'll fast every Monday till we get married, or not every Monday. I think 20 Mondays or something like that. They'll say we'll fast like that, or sometimes parents will fast for the children, or wives will fast for the husbands. So these are basically ascetics, tapasvis. They undertake some kind of tap, but for material gain. So Krishna says that a yogi stands on top of all these. A person who is following the ritualistic practices of karma, a person is engaging in the study of the scriptures, a person who is following different kinds of austerities, a yogi is higher than them. Now you notice that there is one class of people that Krishna does not speak in this, and that is devotee. So he does not say that a yogi is higher than a devotee, because later on he will say that a devotee is higher than a yogi. But he has established this, what he calls, later on the 12th chapter, he'll call the yoga ladder. He'll call this levels of succession. Last verse. And of all the yogis, the one with great faith, he always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service unto me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and he is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So you see that Krishna at this point, he is talking about a bhakta. He is not really talking about a yogi. So this is his segue into the 7th chapter, where now he'll openly start talking about devotional service. So he talks about a few qualities of a devotee. One who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service unto me. So one thing that was missing in the yogi is that the yogi does not really serve Krishna. The process of Ashtanga Yoga is mechanical. That this is how I'm connected to the material world. So by my own strength, I will break this connection to the material world and I'll go to the spiritual world. But for a devotee, he does not really try very hard to break the material connection. He tries very hard to get the mercy of Krishna and relies on Krishna to break that material connection. So the mood that he says is the one who has great faith in me. So what is the biggest symptom of faith in Krishna? That whether things are going well for you or they are not going well for you, Krishna is your ultimate benefactor. Because many of us will think that as long as things are going well, then thank you Krishna, Jai Ho Krishna ki. And when things are not going well, then we are like, what's going on with you, Krishna? Are you really God? How could you allow such things to happen to me? And that also to me, a great devotee of yours. So we have this schizophrenia that when things are going well, we are devotees. When things are not going well, we are blasphemers. But Krishna says, one who has great faith in me, that regardless of what the material situation is, the person has still this conviction that Krishna is God. And he thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental service. So the definition of bhakti is devotional service. Is there has to be service. One cannot become a devotee sitting in vacuum. One cannot become a devotee sitting under a tree in a jungle. The definition of a devotee is Shravana Kirtan Smarana Vandanam Padya Sevan Dasare Pujan Sakhijan Atmanivedan. These are the 9 forms of devotion. All of them are basically have the common thread of service, yes, that imbues them. So we'll end the 6th chapter here and see if there are any questions. Maybe a few minutes of questions if there are any. We can call the children, Indulika.